Hello and welcome to the Education on Fire show. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have anything you want to say, any comments you want to do, please do put them in and we're able to bring them up, and we'd love to get you included as much as possible. The first thing that I always like to mention is the fact that why is this the Education on Fire show as opposed to the podcast? Well, the main reason is that we get to chat and have this interaction through the comments, and also there are things that we want to share visually which we're not able to do just on the audio show as well. So I'd like to have these opportunities to bring bits of the community together, but also to share some visual things as well, and make it a sort of a family feeling thing. So that's the reason we're here as the Education on Fire show. Really do let us know where you're watching from, how we know you, whether you work with Tatiana. It'll be amazing just to sort of find out some of that background stuff. So yeah, thank you so much indeed. So we're going to be talking about education in terms of engaging students, in terms of sort of keeping their interest, but also we're going to be doing that in terms of online, but also in person. And Tatiana's got a wealth of information but also experience in terms of doing that as a professor, but also in terms of we're going to make sure that people within the education space generally are able to do it, and you'll be able to adapt all of these sorts of things depending on your setting. So let's bring Tatiana on and she can introduce herself and tell you a little bit more about her. Tatiana, thank you so much for being here.
A pleasure, Mark. Love talking education. Can do it all day, every day, especially my favorite topic, which is engagement and interactivity in the classroom. So,
absolutely,
my pleasure.
Amazing. Now, Tatiana and I, about a year ago, got to hang out in Boston and in Massachusetts, and we were there at Creator Camp. We're both Ecamm users, which is the program we use to do our streaming, and I use for my podcast and everything. So we sort of met from the technology side, and of course, here we are, sort of sharing the education side as well. And we've had some great conversations since then, which has been fantastic. And she's got some great bits of organization and some great bits of things that she's doing to help people generally. So why don't you first of all, Tatiana, tell us a little bit about what your kind of week looks like in terms of your day job, so to speak, and also how you're using that in other ways.
Absolutely. Well, I teach at a university on the East Coast of the United States in New Jersey. I live in Pennsylvania and grew up in New Jersey, though. And I actually went to this university myself. So I'm an alumni and now I'm teaching there. So I think that in and of itself is so interesting. A bit of a circular moment to come back and teach there. I've been teaching there for 7 years. I've taught leadership courses there. I'm currently teaching public speaking and also a brand new course, which is a social media based course. So the students for the public speaking class are every major you can imagine. It is a requirement for communication majors, but in that class, I get students from every walk of life at the university. The social media class is specifically for human resources and labor relations majors. So that is within a specific school. And then I've taught I taught leadership for the business school as well as for another school where the students were majoring in public health types of classes, health administration. So it's been a very interesting experience for these past 7 years, teaching both in person and virtually. It would be hard to pick, Mark. If you had to pick, would there be a clear winner for you, virtual or in person?
I think it depends partly on what day it is sometimes. I mean, I've spent today teaching it in person, and then yet there was a school that emailed over the weekend to say, because of all the floods and stuff we've had here in the UK, and I know it's been the same in parts of America as well, they actually went online for a day because there was issues with some of the sort of the utilities and they had to get people in. So they were like, we're a virtual school for a day, just like it was in COVID. And everyone was kind of like, oh, okay. And I thought it was really interesting what people were then going to do in that. Were you going to make do for that one day? Or were you going to kind of think, I've got this in the bag because I'm doing a lot of online stuff anyway and I'm used to doing it as well? And I thought there's a whole myriad of things I could do if I had to have taught that day, which luckily I didn't. I'm going to be doing it in person later in the week. But I thought actually I have the ability hopefully to engage with my pupils and do it in a different way rather than just, I'm sorry we're not in the same room and I'm able to, show you stuff on the drums and hear your things in person, but we can take it in a different direction. Let's watch some things, let's share some things, let's, like you say, learn some things in a different way because it's a different medium, and then that way, like you say, you get that extra engagement that way.
Yes, we have so many more choices now than we ever did Absolutely. So I think, thinking back to COVID, there was like the panic moments of, oh my gosh, people have to teach virtually. We need to figure this out. Whereas now, at least for me, I have one class that's completely virtual, but we meet live online, and then another class that's in person. But 4 of the 14 weekly classes that we get together for are virtual because it's a public speaking class. And I feel it's really important for students to develop virtual confidence, virtual speaking skills, learn to navigate the technology, learn to navigate this stage, which is very different than the one that's in person. But I want them to learn how to do that too. And I think that it's an essential skill in our world for them to have and to develop. So I get to be actively involved in both arenas, and I like both. They each have their pluses. I mean, for sure, because I live in Pennsylvania, driving all the way out to another state to teach is not my favorite part. It's not my favorite, but I do love the energy and the emotion, and honestly, just being able to know that their focus really is on me, because it's just so much easier to be aware of that when we're in person versus online. But I have to say, this semester, I have been so impressed with my virtual students. I don't know if it's like I'm making this up in my mind and it's wishful thinking, but I really feel like they're completely engaged. So
Yeah.
it just feels extremely rewarding to be teaching. So I'm very grateful for the students that I have.
Yeah, amazing. Let's say hello to a couple of people. We've got Neil, my partner in crime on Creative Amplifiers.
Hey,
Hi, Neil.
Neil.
Thank you so much for joining us. We've got Dick. Hi, Dick.
Hey, how are you? Got
Fantastic.
international audience, Mark. This is lovely.
Exactly. Greetings from Sweden. And we also have Germany as well.
Hi, Saeed.
Amazing. And we have Eden in the house as well. How are you?
Eden
Thank you
Lou, the one
so
and
much.
only.
Exactly. And she was on the Creative Amplifiers show with us yesterday, doing an amazing job telling us all about Camo and her work with Reincubate. So, yes,
Oh,
thank you
fabulous.
so much for that. It was wonderful.
I didn't realize that. Somehow I missed that. I have been so deep into teaching right now that I missed a lot of stuff on social media. So I will be sure to catch that replay, guys, for sure. Eden, I'll be definitely checking that out.
So, and that was really good, because we were talking about sort of how you sort of show up online, how you get into the sort of the online space and the presenting space, and then this idea of being able to interact with people and keep the engagement going. And yeah, it's different than when you're in person, but I think you take the elements of the human connection, which I think comes across so much all the time, and then you're just sort of slightly changing the goalposts a little bit, whether you happen to be in person or not. But the essence of what you're trying to do, and I think with the tools that are available and the understanding that you're still talking to a human person, so your cameras are on, your microphones are on, you want to be interacting, you want to be sort of saying hello to people, you want to know a little bit more about them rather than just imparting knowledge. But I think that's the same for education generally. It's just that I think the virtual gives you the opportunity to do that and think about it a little bit more. And then I think that also then helps your in-person practice as well.
Yes. And one of the things that virtual offers that in-person does not is this secondary channel of information transmission that is fast. So in an in-person environment, it's not as easy to collect a bunch of data from everybody, because not everybody has their computer in front of them. Some students do, but not everybody does. Or, I'm going to say students because I'm teaching students, but other people, it might be their team members or their group members, or the other groups that they might teach. But in my case, being virtual, ask a question, people comment in the chat, the fact that we can engage everybody simultaneously or within the same time block is pretty impressive. And I think that's one of the greatest benefits of being able to teach virtually. For example, yesterday in my public speaking class is in person this semester. But yesterday, students were all delivering podcasts. Their first assignment is a podcast. So, and I like scaffolding the learning rather than from the very first speech, you're required to do everything. I think that it's better to take things in steps. So first step, I want them to be thinking about their voice, the quality of their voice, the energy in their voice. And what better way than a true podcast without the video element to it. So we focus on an audio only style podcast, and I have them do it in groups of 3, and they have to teach They have to inform. It's essentially an informative speech where they're teaching the class on a public speaking topic. So they're diving into the textbook by picking a concept, then getting a podcast ready. I have them make a podcast graphic. I have them add audio elements that would make it true to a podcast style. I have them build in sponsorships or commercials or little snippets of prizes or hints about the next episode, things like that, while still building that structure of the speech. Because a podcast is a form of communication, right? It's also essentially a speech, and it is an informative speech for the most part. Where in the world that we're in with education, the rhetorical purpose of it is to inform, educate, teach. That, however, does not mean that it needs to be boring. Of course not, right? There's still an element that's fun and entertainment, that entertaining about it. I always want to be funnier. This is one of the gifts I wish I had. I wish I was a funny person because I love funny people and that really engages me. So I've just come to accept the fact that I'm really not that funny. And it's someone that I used to know a long time ago said to me, yeah, you're not that funny, but you are entertaining, though usually only when you don't mean to be. So I've just accepted that it will happen sometimes, pretty much unintentionally. But
True self.
I even have books on how to be funnier and stuff. But I don't know. It just doesn't happen for me to be funny. But I do want to be funny, Mark. That is one thing that I think this. If you have that gift, that is a powerful teaching tool for sure.
And I think the idea of, I mean, I don't know if you would call it project learning. I mean, it's essentially a project that you sort of put together, but I think there's a little bit of the idea about how you can do the engagement by putting it in a dimension that the students can actually want to be part of. So the reason I love, well, obviously podcasting is it's what I do and what I love as well, but you can take it in so many areas. You've sort of got, say, you've got the speaking element of it, you've got the design element of it, but also if you've got free reign, the actual content of what that might be could be very much related to what your students are involved in, what they love. Maybe it's something to do with the school, maybe it's something you're doing around the class as well as just being within the class. And then all of a sudden it takes on a life of its own because they're thinking, oh, well, how can I do this? I'm really into this. This is what I spend my time doing. And now I'm able just to bring it into what I'm doing. So the engagement's there because it's something they're interested in and maybe passionate about. And then they want to show you more and more of what they've got within you. And then, but you've got that, like you say, that scaffolding, that structure in place to allow them to do that.
100%. And for the informative speech, I assign them the chapter. So they get the big theme. They have to narrow it down to one key idea. But for their next speech, their persuasive speech, that is a solo project. And they get to pick the topic. And these are the requirements. It has to be a topic that they care about. They have to naturally be engaged, passionate about it, deeply care about it. But they also have to be able to connect it to their audience. And I think this is one of the first big teaching tips that I want to share. I tell my students, you have to know your audience and you have to be able to connect your topic to their world. You have to be able to answer the question, why should they care about this thing? And you can't answer why they should care if you don't know that much about them. So you have to start with knowing about them. And it's the same thing for us in teaching. We very often start with what's the content, what's the knowledge, what's the information, what's the lesson I want to give. But, there's that famous saying, and I think it's originally quoted, I think his name is Peter, that connection comes before content. I attended John Chen's active engagement conference today. It's a 3-day thing. I was there for part of the day today. He's reiterating that same message, connection before content. I hear other people who I want to recommend that you follow in education, Chad Littlefield, Jan Keck. So many great things. And they're always talking about connection before content or connection with content, that relationship of we can't really get to sharing all that knowledge until we know the people. So getting to know our students is essential. Now, in a class like mine, 2 classes, 25 students, 30 students, it's doable. I understand that is not the same thing if you have 100 or 200 students. That level of getting to know them is different, but I still think that it's possible because we have different types of tools that gives us a lot of information. So for me, before You plan the lesson before you get to the content. It really, truly is. And this is whether you're a speaker, a presenter, a guest. It really is about knowing the audience first and being able to connect it and come prepared to give that audience something that's going to be valuable to them.
It really is that sense. And I remember people doing it almost for younger children when they're going into a classroom. It's that kind of, what did you do at the weekend? And then all of a sudden, very quickly, it's that kind of, this person plays football, this person plays netball, this person plays hockey, this person had a trip that they were going with their grandparents. And I think not only do you then get to know who they are and what their life is about, so you can have those quick conversations and you can do it, but I think the buy-in then is so much more engaged, because I want to listen to you, even if it was something I'm not interested in, because I know that you're interested in me. And I think that continual circle, and I think it's then much more about, not the big conversations, but the small conversations that go on. And I think little bit by little bit, and especially if you're with the same class, like say, whether it's a semester, maybe it's a whole year, maybe they do various different things with you and it goes over a number of years. That's one of the things I like about when I'm teaching drums, is that sometimes I have them from, 7 years old, but they might go all the way through the school. So I might only see them for half an hour a week, but I see them over multiple years, and you see them grow up and change. But they still beautiful. Remember you at that first moment when they were so excited about the world, and they might have gone through and they've got exam stress and all that sort of stuff. But there's a different relationship there than they have with almost anybody else in the school.
Absolutely. And I just also want to acknowledge the power and the influence that we have as educators in the lives of our students, whether they're 7-year-olds or, like in my case, 20 on average. My students are about 20 years old. There is so much power, ability, opportunity, potential for, and I believe it's a sense of duty for me to create something beautiful for them, to offer a wonderful experience for them in the classroom. I know not everyone is going to click really strongly with me. We're not going to have lifelong friendships. I'm not going to have that with every student, but I have them with many students. Above that, though, I want them to also develop relationships with each other. So we talked about how we need to get to know our students, and maybe that's going to be via a getting to know you form that you send out before class starts, or if it's an individual music lesson, getting some information about them. Even if it's a class of 200 people, find out some things about the class. In my case, I make it an assignment worth a few points. Right? It's not a big assignment. It's just a small points. Fill out this survey so that we can start to get to know each other. And it's not just demographic style questions, like age, what year are you in college? I'm also asking questions. And this is something I learned from other people in the world of education as well, like Tracy Addy and another professor, Rachel Kremen, who used to teach with me at the School of Communications, sharing different activities. And the questions get a little bit deeper, asking questions about how many students are commuting to class for me versus living on campus, because that is different. That's a different set of obstacles, especially in a school like mine that has multiple campuses. And sometimes students have to go park all the way over here to hop on a bus to get to class. So just understanding these different things, or how many students have a job outside of college, how many students have caregiving responsibilities, just all of these different things. That's the survey is anonymous, so they're not being asked to say names or identify, but it's just getting to know them. So then on the first day of class, I want them to get to know each other, because my thinking is I'm only one person. There's 25 students in the class. This is a rich opportunity for them to start networking. These are their peers. These are people who are going through the same, I don't want to call it torture in the class because it's not torture, but the same difficulties of being able to speak in public, of developing a speech, of refining a speech, of growing and getting that discomfort that comes with, like, you have to feel uncomfortable. You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in order to grow. So how do I get them to know each other? I have to create opportunities for them to talk to each other. And I do it from the very first day. I pair them up, and sometimes it has to be a group of 3 depending on the numbers, but they're going to introduce, not themselves, each other. I give them 10 minutes to get to know each other. I might use some prompts. I might use some different questions as guides, but generally I tell them, at the end of this, you're going to have 1 minute to introduce your partner. So if you and I were in the class, Mark, we're partners. Or let's say, Eden and Saeed end up being partners, or Neil and Dick end up being partners. Then we just ask each other a bunch of questions. And my favorite thing in the classroom is when the classroom starts going all abuzz with conversation. And it's not me talking. It's like, release them into this thing, and then boom, they're all chatty, talky, learning about each other, figuring out what they have in common. And in a few short minutes, and then everybody knows and I have them come up to the front of the class together in pairs on the first day. So it's a little bit less scary to know you're up there together, and all you're doing is talking about each other. There's no pressure. You're not being graded. You get points for the assignment. The introduction speech is worth points, because I have found that students need to have things associated with points in order for them to be motivated to do it. But the concept is very low stakes because they're not being graded. It's just you did it or you didn't do it. So as long as you get up there, you talk about your partner for a minute, you get full points. But what happens is they learn early on things about each other that they're not going to forget. There's no way I could remember everything everybody said in introduction speech day. But I'm not going to forget what I learned about you, my partner, Mark. You're not going to forget what you learned about me, especially the things we have in common. And then I plan activities throughout the semester, because the one thing I think we sometimes make the mistake of doing as educators is a one and done. Great, that was a great one-time activity, moving on to the next thing. What I try to do is create something and then build a connection, weave it in throughout the whole semester. So for example, you and I were introduction partners. Throughout the semester, I'm going to call, okay, now partner up with your intro partners for this thing, so that we get a chance to connect again, because we're going to be on different teams. The podcast teams, that's a different group of people. Then you have your solo speeches. Then they're actually going to create an online video show. They're going to create online shows together that now includes the video piece at the end of the semester. But in the meantime, continuing those relationships, I think, is a really important skill that we often overlook because, again, we are focused on meeting our objectives or delivering the class content or sticking to the syllabus. But at the end of the day, the knowledge is important, but the connections with each other is more important than that.
And I think for me, maybe it's the parent in me, but sometimes the relationship seems the same sort of thing, as the elder person in the house, as the father, as the more experienced person is often the way I like to do it. Not right, but the more experienced is the fact that, like you said, I know the way the semester's going to go. I know how maybe the next few months of our household is going to go in the trips we might be planned or some of the things that we're going to be doing in the activities. But what we can do is that not everyone needs to know that all of the time. The kids aren't interested in what's happening much beyond next week, let alone what's going to be happening in a few months' time. But we kind of need that as a household to make it work, to plan, to make sure we know what's going on, much the same as a professor or a teacher. But those sort of bits and pieces that, like say, the bits where you sort of drip feed those bits of information, like you say, there's a small event that you do where we get to go to a party. It might be a children's party, it might be a birthday party, could be anything, but you kind of know that all these little things are building up to a bigger picture, which is actually their kind of rich life, hopefully. And I think, like you say, having that overarching idea of, yes, by the end of this year, they need to have done this, and this, and we want these credits, and you're going to graduate with flying colours, but also having had a really nice time, made those connections and done it in a fun way, an engaging way, and hopefully where they've made friends, if not for life, certainly within that experience, a way that's going to support them, not just in the classroom, in their subject matter that they're studying, but outside as well.
And that is 100% possible. I've seen it done semester after semester. I will have students who classes ended and I get pictures of them playing sand volleyball. Just wanted to let you know we got together after class. Or they went out to celebrate, they got something to eat, they stayed in touch, they meet up. I mean, so to me, that is a very beautiful, beautiful thing. And I tell them, I'm like, listen, 5 years from now, when you're at your job and you've got to do a speech, there are 25 other people in this room who've been through this class with you, whom you can rehearse with. I'm like, listen, I'm around too, God willing, I'll live a nice long life and I'll be around too. But you also have each other. So teaching them to develop that peer network, those connections. And I always point them to LinkedIn as well. Hey, like stay together on LinkedIn. You're going to want to cheer each other on, celebrate your good news. You know, people will move across the country, across the world, but we're not limited by that anymore. We can all stay connected. So that's another really big tip that I have for every teacher is to help students, strengthen them up by connecting them into a larger network of other students as well. Like if we have those students in the classroom, make sure that not only are we getting to know them, we're helping them get to know each other and create strong relationships in the classroom. You said one thing that I think is very valuable also, which is having a good time. I love teaching, but I also want to enjoy the experience. And I can't enjoy the experience if I'm just talking the whole time. If I'm just lecturing, even though my title is lecturer, that's not the idea, right? That's not. There used to be a podcast. Barbie Honeycutt had a podcast called Lecture Breakers. She just retired it in July, and I think the episodes are not even available in terms of archives. But I was able to be a guest on her show twice, and I just love the whole idea of like lecture breakers, where you're not following that same pattern of just talking at people, but having them be engaged. And you know, the way to do that is active learning. Active, not passive. Not to say that there isn't space for passive learning. There is a space for passive learning. When I'm listening to a podcast, when I'm driving, it's got to be passive learning. I can't be active learning in that moment. I can't be engaged and committed and responding unless it's in my own head at that point. But you see what I mean, like what the difference is. There are passive learning is a part of our life, and that makes sense too. But in general, when we have people in front of us, it needs to be active learning, which means they need to be participating. And we have to create those types of activities for them to want to participate.
Yeah, and I think for me that the musician inside of me sort of has both sides of that as an experience. Is the fact that, you know, I have over the years, you know, the 10,000 hour rule of kind of practicing to hone your skill is very much true, and you have to kind of lean into that. But why do you do it? Not because I love spending all that time in the room, but because of the experiences, the connection, the people I work with, the performances, the recordings, the trips, all of that sort of stuff, to get myself in a position to be able to enjoy that in that way. And that might be one end of the scale. I mean, I went to, you know, I'm a professional. That's what I do for a living. But I still had those same internal feelings when I first started. You know, when I was the junior wind band at school, it was suddenly, well, actually for this week I'm not in school just doing my lessons as normal. We're on a residential, and we get to wear our own clothes, and we get to rehearse, and in the afternoon we play football, or we get to go to the gym or whatever. And it was that kind of, I'm really loving this, and I'm with a lot of like-minded people. And so like I say, the bonds as well as the passion and the sort of the subject matter, being music in that particular scenario, just really brings it to life, I think. And I think anything that you can relate in that particular way, and that's very much an in-person thing, because of course we're making music in real time in that way, but it's certainly something which we've managed to sort of bring into the virtual world, as well as sort of modern sort of recording and engagement kind of sort of follow suit into everything else that we do.
Music is fascinating to me, Mark, because I don't have that gifting. I believe I wanted to when I was a kid, and I know that it's never too late kind of a thing, but it's just something that didn't happen for me. But just yesterday, Ben and I were watching Bohemian Rhapsody, and we're listening to the story of not just Freddie Mercury, because I know lead singers always get like the most recognition, but he couldn't do it without them. And that's just the truth, right? There's all these other musicians and the way people create music. And then we also went to a live Chicago band tribute this weekend as well. So it's been a very music inspired past few days for us. So music has been on my mind so much. And it reminded me that there's another really important tip when it comes to teaching, and that is being willing to share things from our own life and transforming that to something that matters for the students. Like, I haven't fully formed it out just yet, but watching Bohemian Rhapsody was quite an experience for me. And I'm sure that I can take that and bring it to my classroom. My immediate thought is I think that we have a lot as speakers that we can learn from performers and from musicians, and especially the stage presence part. And some students, they're very shy even to show a little bit of emotion. Like even just a little bit is a lot to ask of them because they're just more even keeled, even toned, even tempered. So it's asking them to step out of their comfort zone. But taking the things that happen in our lives, it's not just coming to class to share our stories. We have to connect it somehow to the content. And I think that there's something really powerful in those sharing those anecdotes and creating analogies to things that relate to the content. So, for example, Freddie Mercury on that microphone, comparing him when he first started to his 10th, 12th, 20th concert. I think that that's an analogy we can draw in a public speaking class. So, being able to take our life to the degree that's appropriate. And I know everybody's different. I'm pretty open, pretty comfortable to share a lot of things with my students, but I know not everybody feels the same way. But making sure that we become a real person to our students too, and we can only do that by sharing a bit of our lives with them. And I think that has the power to have deep impact. Plus, anytime we hear a story, we automatically perk up a bit more. There's piece at the Engaging conference today. I was listening to somebody talking about his trip on an airplane and how he ignored the woman next to him because she seemed different. And, he's describing her, and you kind of start to feel and see that story in your mind as the person is sharing it. And then he tied it to a message of losing opportunities because he was being closed-minded. That was the whole point of the story. But I'm sitting here retelling you the whole thing because I remember it. Because the story, if he had just said, hey, listen, it's really important to stay open-minded, don't lose out on opportunities, and just because somebody's different than you, you really shouldn't just disregard them. Okay, that might go in one ear at the other, and I agree with him. But the story part is like, wow, yeah, that makes it come alive. So for us to be able to share that with other people is a really powerful teaching tool, sharing stories about ourselves with others.
And I think also, I mean, films like sort of the Bohemian Rhapsody and that sort of behind the scenes idea that, like you said, the person Freddie Mercury was on stage in his absolute zone of genius isn't the person that you saw off stage. And that sort of sense of understanding, everyone's fearful, everyone's nervous about things. No one thinks it's definitely going to work out. You put out there what you think is something interesting. If you actually take Bohemian Rhapsody as a song, it's like you can't make that up and expect it to be the song that it's become. So at the time, it's that kind of, I'm just doing what I think is right, and we're putting things together, and hopefully people like it. History sort of tells you, well, actually, it becomes one of the things that almost everybody in the world's going to know. But at the time, you might be fearful, you might be nervous about performing. Like I say, you're going to be standing up on stage. There's a lot of people there. It's not like I've done this 100 times before and actually I don't care. I care probably more because I'm actually performing to more people, and understanding that actually that's part of your job as well. So like I say, if you're doing public speaking or you're entering a class which you've not done before, understanding what it's like for everyone is really important. And it's something that I did. Actually, I did some music workshops for some teachers as part of their CPD. And a lot of teachers are fearful of doing music because they're like, I'm not a musician. I don't know anything about music. And one of the things I used to do is we sort of formed a samba band. So I got everyone to sit in a circle. And they were like, I can't do this. I can't do this. It's like, well, I teach it to 6 and 7 year olds upwards. So if they can do it, I'm pretty sure that you'll be able to do it. And I said, I love the fact that you're feeling a little bit nervous about this, because think about what's happening in your classroom all the time. You're constantly sharing new things. And there are people in the class who are nervous about that and not understanding or not knowing where it's going to go. And you're getting to feel what it's like as a student, not just because you're young, but because you're out of your comfort zone. And so I said, look, it's about what you're doing. And like you said, having the scaffolding, doing the steps, the things that I was teaching were very, very simple. I said, but it's the layering up of sounds and rhythms and all those sorts of things which sort of creates the overall effect. And once they then understood the process and they understood how it got put together, they said, oh, we can do that. And I said, yes. And also you have the skills of being a teacher and you know your pupils and you can put it together really quickly. So actually, when they understood that the understanding of what they were trying to do was the important part and the actual learning of it actually kind of took care of itself, I think there was a little bit of a light bulb moment there, because they were worried about the unknown. Once they understood where that sort of spotlight was taking them and how they were going to get there, before they'd even played anything, they then understood that actually that kind of took away some of the nervousness and that they were on a joint path together, whatever that was going to be. And by the end, they're all wanting to take the lead and sort of run with it, and were able to do it for all those students. But it's a really interesting thing, I think, as an adult, as a teacher, to be able to put those things and experience them, because it's very easy. I've done this class loads of times. I know how this goes. That's great. But I think that comes across sometimes. So to feel what it's like from a perspective of the pupil and the student is a really sort of important thing sometimes, just to realize that, yeah, I understand the emotion of what we're doing here as well as the content.
You said so many powerful things in there, at least three that I'm taking away, that I hope my brain will be able to remember all of them. One of them is taking the posture of a student now. We were all students once. That's not the same as remembering what it's like to be a student right now. Not because it's a different time, but it was just so long ago in our memory. So when we take classes, when we take that posture of a student, the posture of a learner, that's very different. So we have to make sure. And the reason I say this is I took a course. It was a faculty learning community at the university that I loved every second of. But there were due dates and there were projects and there were discussion boards and all these things that we had to do, just like in our class. And it reminded me what it's like to have so many competing priorities with deadlines and expectations from others. That is a really powerful thing to experience for yourself. Because on the teaching side of it, we might be like, well, I gave you enough notice. You know when the deadline is. I've worked on this with you. And I think it helps us be more compassionate, more understanding. Now, I am a person who holds students accountable for their decisions. So I'm not super gentle in terms of, I want them to learn accountability and communication and to be people of integrity. And just as recent as yesterday, working with a student who hasn't come to class in 4 weeks, popped up all of a sudden. So we need to talk about that. I assumed you dropped the class. So we did have a conversation about that, and the student has lost quite a bit of opportunity already. There's nothing I can do about that. That ship sailed. You didn't communicate with me at all. But let's talk about what you're going to agree to do moving forward and how I can help you be successful moving forward. So that's one thing that your thinking reminded me of, in terms of we need to be able to remember what it's like to be a student and have a little bit more compassion and understanding for that position in the ways that we can. Then there was also understanding different energy levels as we plan for activities. And I think that it is really important that getting to know your students part. It's also important to understand. I do an activity early on in the semester where I have students identify how many of them consider themselves introverts, extroverts, ambiverts, or just no clue what I'm talking about. We can have this conversation about energy levels and how many people truly are energized by coming to class, exchange of ideas, and how many people find that can be stimulating but a bit draining. How many people would prefer to type it in the chat, kind of a thing. Just so I want to understand, especially because by my own nature, I am drawn to engagement. In a class, I am the first person to raise my hand, especially if nobody else does. I'm like, oh yeah, let me help this poor speaker out and say something. And I love connecting. I love talking. I love participating. I love the activities. But that's not every person in the classroom. And we need to plan for everybody's energy levels. And we need to make sure that we do quieter activities that give people a chance to think on their own, not be impacted by groupthink or influenced by the thought of another person. There will always be the people who readily raise their hand and can't wait to participate. But that doesn't give us equity in the classroom. That doesn't give other people voice. And what happens is that once students know that, hey, the professor is always going to call on the first person that raised their hand, and we know it's going to be one of those three people, then the quieter people just get quieter. But because by nature, they're probably more reserved. They're in listen. And I'm not saying that they're disengaged. It's just that by nature, some people are listeners first and not speakers, and vice versa. So I talk to them early on in the semester, and I have a little tea tin that I bring into every class with their picture and their name on it in little tiny squares. And I randomly ask people, what do you think? But what I also do is I preface it by saying a bit of a disclaimer that the reason I do this is because I want a fair and equitable representation of voices in the classroom. And I don't want to inadvertently keep calling on the same people or just continuing to hear from the same voice. I would like to hear from all of you. But my intention, I don't ask them the question to put them on the spot. That's never the goal. It's always to have them think, to have them respond, to share their insight. But they can always give me the signal if like this is a bad day, or if somehow this is going to feel embarrassing, that they can give me a signal like, can you come back to me? Just say something like, can you come back to me? I'm not really sure. Can I pass? And then yes, like we'll pass and move on, kind of a thing too, because I don't want that to be a barrier to their participation or make them feel like they are being singled out in some way. But so far, I honestly have almost never had an issue whatsoever with this. And it really is just about making sure, hey, I want to hear from you too. It's okay that you're the quiet one. I still want to hear from you. What do you think? So setting up that, but also having our activities be conducive to different energy levels. Not everything has to be stand up, go to the other side. I mean, I'm lucky to be in a nice big classroom that gives me tons of space. Not all classrooms are like that at the university, but I get lucky. But to be able to have those different types of activities that are going to appeal to all different kinds of energy levels too is a really important part of being an extraordinary educator that I wanted to make sure that we shared out loud.
And I think going sort of full circle in terms of getting to know your students, because this is where I think I was talking about being the grown up in the room as well. It's that kind of, if you want everyone to be involved, but there's someone who's terrified about getting something wrong, they can still be involved in the conversation, and they might still want to participate, but the question's open-ended, or it's so simple that they're obviously going to know what it is. So they build that confidence of being part of the group without actually, like say, being put on the spot or wanting to sort of share those things as well. And I think that's where there's a whole kind of unwritten kind of science, I think, that great teachers and great people who understand that have, because they and speakers, you read the room and you know where to push, where to come back, where to be really empathetic, where to understand what's going on with anybody, and like I say, to have that personal relationship, so that if it might only be a look, but you're like, yeah, you have your day, we'll come back another day and you can participate, because I know this is just one of those days, or whatever it's going to be. I really love that. It's really, really, really fascinating. And I love the fact there's been so much chat going on in the chat. And do tell me if you're watching. I'm really fascinated how many of you actually have met each other in person. We're sort of talking at the beginning about the virtual world and the in-person world, because there's an awful lot of interesting comments coming through. I love that one, Saeed. Thank you. Really good. And yes, there's lots of things here. I think Eden was talking about very understanding, and also, yes, I love the fact here, sort of understanding your environment and all of those things going through as well. What's it? Eden was there. Just thinking that the facilitator would do all the work and I'd be freeloaded off. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of bounce going on between all
Eden is a funny one. Eden knows how to bring the humor.
She does. She does. And as she said, just kidding. Brilliant. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so I would definitely connect content tools in that order. Definitely the way that is. And we're talking about the tools as well. We are going to do some of those online things as well. And really important to sort of, but like I say, I think now, having done this wonderful conversation about what it's all about, you can then understand how the tools then take that forward in a kind of a sort of a virtual way. Virtual people aren't real humans. They're just bits and bytes.
That's actually a good title for a workshop or something, Bits and Bytes, where we're talking about the technology. I'm writing that down. Thank you, Saeed. I'm stealing that.
Yeah, very good, very good. And we had a question here as well from Dick. How does the basketball game in class, or how is it going? Is it still fun?
Oh, very nice. So this is an activity that I do in the beginning of class. And so I had shared that with Dick with the Ecamm for educators. I believe we were talking about this. And so rather than going through the syllabus, like most people call the first week of college classes syllabus week because that's the week that people just always go over the syllabus. But not in my class. We hit the ground running right from the start. And I don't want it to just be, and I'm not clueless. I know people are not reading the syllabus. I mean, it's too much.
Yeah.
It's so many pages. It's so many things. But there's key points that I don't want them to forget. So what I've done is gamified the syllabus. And so we play the syllabus quiz game. And when it's in person, I just project it up on a slide. Although I might make it a virtual tool so that I can capture the data more easily in person as well. But and I have them go into teams. So as long as and they get the chance to talk to each other to see if they can come up with the right answer, and they get 1 point if they get the right answer. And I give them little tiny squares of paper, or I have them cut up squares of paper. If they get it right, they have to crumble up the sheet of paper. So this is something I learned from Jennifer Gonzalez's blog called Cult of Pedagogy. It's called Crumple and Shoot. So I do the syllabus quiz game. Then they get to crumble up the sheet of paper if they get the answer correctly. And if they don't, it just stays flat. So, and again, they can confer with their team. So they take their guesses. What's the right guess? And so we go through all of the answers. And then I throw in some trick questions, some fun questions in there, but mostly the things that are like, this is really important. And one of the questions is, what are the last 4 digits of my phone number? And they're all like, what? And I'm like, just kidding. That's not a real question, but please do take out your phone and save me as a contact, my email and my phone number so that you know exactly how to reach me. Communication is important to me. I want you to be able to let me know if you can't come to class, if you're falling behind, if something is not clear. I tell them, like, the entire reason I drive all the way from Pennsylvania is to be of service to you. I am here because I feel like I have something valuable to contribute to your life. And I know you're going to contribute something to mine and to each other. But this is why I do this. It's definitely not for money. I am here because I want to help you. So please reach out to me. Don't suffer in silence. There's no need for you to do that. I am here to help you. So that's one of the ways we go about the game. So then at the end, each team has however many crumpled sheets of paper they have correct. And I bring in 3 buckets, a teeny tiny one, a medium, and a big one. The big one is worth 1 point because they've got to now shoot their crumpled up shots into the basket. The medium one is worth 2 points, and the tiny one is worth 3 points if they can get it. So then it just becomes, first of all, it gets them up out of their seats. It gets them moving. It gets them participating. They can decide in the team if everybody's going to divvy up the shots, if they're going to have 1 or 2 people shoot all the shots, whatever they decide. And then they get more points. And then we'll see who's the winner of the team. And the winner of the team, they get chocolate. Everybody gets candy and chocolate, whichever team wins. So we're reviewing the syllabus, but I think in a much more interesting and engaging way. And then I was trying to figure out, how can I do that shot game virtually? Like, is there a basketball shooting virtual game for free that I can use? So one of the suggestions was, hey, people can just grab their own cups or their own baskets or their own things at home if you ask them to. Everybody has a mug at least, and just hold it up and try to make a shot. So that was a great suggestion that Dick had given during that conversation, that there are ways to adapt our in-person things for virtual and our virtual things for in-person. But that is one of the fun activities that we do at the beginning of the semester to kick us off on the right track. And the other thing I say at the first day of class is, my goal with our class today is to give you an idea of what the semester with me will be like so that you can make a decision if you're going to stay or not. Because there is that add drop period. I'm like, and I want you to know right from now what this will be like for you.
Yeah, I love that. It's like you don't get a lot of work done. I can imagine.
Have to have Neil in there to keep them on track.
Well, you can try that, but that doesn't necessarily work as well. Yeah, that's exactly. There you are. You see, that's the personality coming out. It's not about the jokes; it's about all those things. I was going to. There are two great takeaways there that I think are really important. One is the fact that we're online on a journey together. So I'm not just here as the teacher, imparting knowledge, that we're all learning. And it might be that I know the syllabus and I'm teaching the syllabus to you, but I'm getting something out of this, every interaction, every bit of learning, improving my skills as an educator, but also improving myself as a human being, and you learn lots of different things from other people. And I think that's really, really important. And I also love the kind of the doing things you're not supposed to do. So that idea of essentially you're screwing up paper and throwing it across the classroom, you're not allowed to do that. You're meant to be sat quiet and doing all the rest of it. So like you say, having this idea of actually the education style that we're doing is whatever we want it to be, as long as we've got that relationship and we're kind of working in those particular ways. One of the things I often do is get people to shout, because you're meant to be quiet and do all that sort of stuff. It's like, when it's your go, if you want to shout, shout. And of course they do, and it's suddenly hilarious and all that sort of stuff. But there's sort of that permission that you've kind of moved the boundaries so far one way that they automatically come back, and then away we go. And I don't do it for that way particularly. It's just the fact that it kind of makes you think, oh, actually, this isn't like a normal class, or this isn't like the people that I normally know who want me to, put my hand up and don't say anything unless I really have to, or whatever that happens to be. So, yeah,
Right.
Fascinating. And Dick saying, thank you for sharing. Yes, indeed.
Oh, my pleasure. My
Brilliant.
pleasure.
So, like I said, we talked about the tools as well. Why don't you take us into the virtual world based on what we've spoken about with some of those sort of interactions and some of those tools that you use from that sort of virtual space when you're teaching, and also how much of this can you also use in person? Is that extra bit of technology as it sort of goes through? So I shall give you the stage, so to speak.
Why, thank you very much. I appreciate it. By the way, Mark, I do need to tell you that I am showing off brand new background space here. We have been thinking how to make this space feel more like me. So literally today has been about rebuilding the background and beautiful shelving and wood elements and lighting. So there's lighting underneath the shelves here because I wanted it to be illuminated. And Ben has, thankfully, he's amazingly talented and wonderful at these things. But I bring this up because in a virtual world, this is part of our nonverbal communication. What's in our background communicates information about us too. It's yes, our face, our expressions, our body, our gestures, all that communicates, but so does the space. And I really wanted the space to feel like me. And I was working with Fulgens. He designed some graphics for me in Ecamm. So he was doing some custom scenes for me. And the concept he came up with for me was, he's like, you're kind of like a morning show. And I'm like, that is right. I am like a morning show. So and I'd already been thinking how much I wanted to have like coffee and tea in the space up here. So I've been thinking so much how to make this space come alive. And so you might want to also be considering your own virtual spaces and how it communicates about you. But this is the first time this is on a live stream. We literally 5 minutes before coming on, we're cleaning up stuff to get ready for live. So it will continue to evolve from here, but this is the first time I'm showing it off, Mark. So just wanted to make mention of that and
Amazing.
Virtual spaces too.
Yeah, I just wanted to. you're getting the love already from it already. Just so yeah, and like I say, it's great having someone who can actually have the skills to be able to do it as well. That's a real gift.
I am so thankful because it's like I basically did a lot of thinking. The hard part was deciding what is it that I want, and it took me like I don't know 6 months to come up with this. But once I showed him, boom. Once I showed him what I wanted, then he was all about it, and he's like, "Yes, I am going to." And then he has a great sense of style and everything too. So it's just beautiful to see it come alive. And I have, I like things clean and put away. So all this shelving gives me that things can be tucked away that I don't need, and I can just show what I do need. But
Lovely.
Our virtual spaces online are really important. So that is definitely one thing, right? So the space. So number one, considering our space. Number two are tools like telestration, what I'm doing right now, writing on screen, telestration. shun. My handwriting, of course, has deteriorated the more we use computers. I used to have nice handwriting when I was young. So, number one, space. Number two, tell a tool like this, right? I am writing on my iPad and I'm using a tool called Video Pencil, which is not the only option for telestration, but to me, it's currently the best one that I have found because I can see exactly where I'm writing versus a different tool that I kind of have to guesstimate where I'm writing. So something like this, I have been enjoying, and I'll do this in class, showing writing different concepts. Like in the social media class the other day, we were debriefing on some content, and then as students say things, I can write them on screen, like put them in boxes. It also works for people who teach math, people who teach history, all these different things that we can do. So writing on the screen. I also think in a virtual world, the way that we use graphics is pretty powerful. So I want to show you how, in one example, I want to teach the spotlight effect in my class. So using graphics by Lucy Agalini called CNVS. It's pronounced canvas, but it's without the vowels. It's get CNVS, or oh shoot, I always mess this up. Saeed, can you please help me with Lucy's link? I think it's getcnvs dot something or another. So this lamp here is from her design packaging. She has a free set that she gives away, and then like over 9,000 beautiful graphics that I love to use in class. So using Ecamm and Canvas, the CNVS package I'm talking about, I want to talk to my students about the spotlight effect. So when I could just say, okay, let's talk about the spotlight effect, but I can also make a graphic like this to say, all right, class, let's talk about the spotlight effect. And I'm even thinking I might wear sunglasses when I do this to make it like very realistic to teach the concept. And of course, the spotlight effect is this idea that we as humans think that everybody else is thinking about us as much as we're thinking about us. So as if we were all walking around with spotlights on us when really we're not, because everybody else is busy thinking about themselves. And of course, this impacts the way we show up when we're presenting, when we're talking. So doing things like this, I think, is very cool to be able to teach different concepts. So again, this is just one that relates to my class, but it can be done with music. It can be done with history. It could be done anything. Finding symbols that are meaningful and using this, because students will not be used to this. I know very few educators who would show up and do something like this to teach a concept. So finding ways to make us stand out. And of course, I'm using Ecamm. If you're a Mac user, Ecamm is available. It is a paid tool. You know, Mark, I know you're in the Ecamm family as well. You probably talk about this on your channel often, but there are options like OBS, which is a free option, and that's across multi-platforms. Not limited by which type of system you use. And there are even additional options beyond that. And I think they'll just continue to improve. I mean, Eden's here. Even Camo is something I teach to my students so that they can have those options. But there are so many different things that we can do. And even if I'm writing on the screen, I'll want to, there's a particular word I want to share. Like, what do I have coming up this week? Oh yeah, we are going to be talking about nonverbal communication. So and I'm teaching this concept called 3D speaking. So let's just say, I'm just going to write 3D speaking on screen. So 3D speaking, and I want to do a quick recap. There is just something soothing about watching people writing. And then we can just go into, okay, all right, class, I want to ask you, let's do a recap. 3D speaking. Who can give me the 1D? Go ahead and shout it out. And then we'll do 2D. And what's 3D? Great. This is where we're going to focus on today, right? And then we move into the activity piece, but being able to illustrate, share different kinds of concepts. They're fun and enjoyable for me. Like, I love seeing this stuff, and it's enjoyable for me to make it, to think about it, to create it. So what do you think about this kind of approach to teaching, Mark?
I think there's let me bring you I'll leave you. There we are. We can bring you back in nicely there. I think it's great because I think what it does is it kind of enables us to kind of, a little bit like you said about the story. I think there's something about the graphics and that way of compartmentalizing what it is that you're doing. You know, you talked about, so we're going to do 3D, tell me those three things, and it's all kind of buzzing around in your head, and then all of a sudden, I see that, I can see you doing it through. And I think, like you said, there's something about the watching somebody do something in real time, because, you know, some people are like the oral side of things, some people like the visual side of things, or the writing side of thing. And I think to be able to combine all of those things in a thoughtful way means that you're going to capture the attention of everybody depending on what it is that they need. And I think just those sort of pinpoints of being able to do that makes a really big difference.
Absolutely. And I would love to share one other thing that I enjoy using in the classroom. And this is using a Miro board. So, for example, and I do want to mention that Miro does offer free accounts to educators, free pro level. So, one practice that I use is called retrieval practice, which is about asking people to recall. And this is great whether you're teaching in a traditional classroom or not. Asking people to recall from last class. So I've set up the board. It's very zoomed out right now so you can see big picture. But I've asked students to, on day one, obviously there'll be no retrieval because it's the first day of class. So I asked them to share something that they're curious about. Something that they're curious about on class one. And what that gives me is a lot of immediate information that I can use to build throughout the semester, right? On day one, what is something that they're curious about? So for example, in the social media class for the students who are human resources majors, one of the questions that they're curious about is a social media account a must-have for every company in today's day and age? Okay. Right? And then they also are curious about the difference between social media in the workplace versus in one's personal life. So it gives me some idea. Then as the classes go on, I'm asking them to chime in and share something they're recalling, something that's standing out to them from the previous class. And this is just a good habit for them to get into, but it also gives me insight and information. And when it comes to Miro, I barely scratch the surface of its capabilities, and I am planning on working with my friend Saeed in the future to build out more beautiful, more visually appealing boards and things. You know, he's going to be able to help me with that. But at a minimum, as a digital whiteboard, this tool is pretty awesome. And then, you know, you set it up and then I have a template and then I can reuse this semester to semester. So tools like this is awesome. There's another tool that I love to use called Stream Alive, and Neil Martin McKenna and I did a talk on that recently on Neil's channel. I've talked about it with Saeed. We're actually all talking a lot about Stream Alive. So Stream Alive is a great tool that I want to recommend, and it is free for up to 30 participants. So if you have a small class, and the beauty of a tool like Stream Alive, so if you check out streamalive.com, the reason why this one is so fascinating to me is that it makes it so that when I'm in a class in Zoom, for example, my students never have to leave the Zoom chat to answer and participate in it, like you might with other fabulous tools like Mentimeter or Slido, where people have to click on a different screen. You give them a code and they have to go elsewhere. Stream Alive allows a bot to come into the Zoom. You allow their bot to come into the Zoom room, and that's how the information is gathered, and then you can share it online. So please check out our video on that for more information on Stream Alive. It's super cool, and I really enjoy using it. And it could even be used in person, where people do have to take out their phone or device to be able to chime in, but it's usable across multi-platform. So those are just some of the tools, but, you know, huge into Ecamm or something similar for the video production side of things. And I also think it's really important to build in little sounds. You know, if a student does something, you know, build in a little audio effect. Do add those visual effects, add in those audio effects. I mean, I have this one scene where, you know, here, I found it. If I can show it, Mark,
Sure.
there's this one scene. Hopefully this is going to work.
Love it.
So When I've got a student that's like, we're celebrating something, like everybody just achieved they finished their speeches, great celebration mode, and then it's got fun music to it. Just being able to do all those kinds of things is really makes the class just so much more enjoyable, 100% more enjoyable.
I love it. And I think my big takeaway from that is the way that you're able to bring the essence of what the in person is with these tools online. So like say, you've effectively got a whiteboard, or you've got the ability to do what you would do in class. You can have something you're going to hit or to make a sound or whatever that happens to be. But also you might not have a sound effect in your class, which you've kind of introduced in the virtual world because it gives you something else. And then you think, well, there's no reason why I can't have a sound in my class that's a buzzer for something, or like say a bell for something, or whatever it happens to be. And so I love sort of the
Absolutely.
takeaways of both of those. You can bring in and sort of expand your world, because I think the whole reason I love this conversation is that we're starting about what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we can affect the people that we're doing it for, to get that engagement and that buy-in, and that, like I say, the fun and the enjoyment as much as best that you can. And I think what hopefully we've been able to talk about and certainly demonstrate today is there are lots of ways of doing it, and it's about your personality. It's how you want to bring it to the world, and also how you want to, I guess, create and cultivate that atmosphere and that way of learning and the environment that you want to do it. And there you can take it virtually, in person, or a combination of both, because of course there are some things which are hybrid, and then understanding what you're trying to get out of those things you can actually do. So I think that's really, really important. And Said, thank you for putting finding that link. That's fantastic. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And I do love this as well. Never write live for an audience. I'm with you with that. It's as much as I can do to make sure that I'm saying the right things sometimes, let alone actually spelling something out as well. And also, yeah, making the Zoom meetings not feel like a Zoom meeting. Exactly like that. And hopefully that's the sort of thing, like say OBS, if you're a PC user, or obviously Ecamm that we love if you're a Mac user, such a big thing to do. Exactly.
And
Let us celebrate, indeed, everything that we're doing. Tatiana, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I love everything that we've managed to cover today. And, we've chatted before, and I know we're over an hour into this. We could be here for another couple of hours, but we'll have to bring it to a close and let everyone have a rest
time
of their
does
time.
fly when you're having a good time. But Mark, I have one final thing that I wanted to save this special thing to the end. And I talked about that getting to know you activity in the beginning of the semester, whether you do it through an anonymous form or you have students reply on stickies in class. One of the questions on there is, the best teachers are the ones who, and then they have to finish the sentence. And no matter which class, no matter what year, what semester, what individual, the overwhelming response, can you guess what it might be, Mark? What do the overwhelming majority of students say? The best teachers are the ones who.
The one I've heard the most on my show is make me feel seen, make me feel be part of that journey.
Yep. It's the ones who care about their students. In one sentence, that is what they say over and over and over again. It's never the one who shows off the best camera, the one who's got the best background, the one who uses the best tools, the one who brings the best snacks, the one who brings the best prizes, never has shown up once. It's always the ones who show that they care about their students. So I would say, if you care about your students, you're already doing really, really, really well. And then these other things can be added on as enhancements. But the number one thing students want to know is that we care.
Love it. So I know the majority of people here know you already from various things that you do, but don't go before you've told people a little bit about Tatiana Teaches, what it is that you're building, growing, and the community that you're trying to be able to sort of help and support people with.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate the opportunity to do that. Yes. So TatianaTeaches.com is my website, which is an ever evolving project. I do have content on YouTube. I actually have to start my YouTube channel all over again because I made the mistake of opening up my YouTube account with a Google account associated with my university. So I'm having to start over from scratch. So right now, the new channel, which has like 7 subscribers and 2 of them are me, is YouTube/Tatiana's Teaching Tools. So I'm waiting for the handle to be converted over to Tatiana Teaches. That one still points to my old channel. But please do connect with me on LinkedIn as well, Tatiana Teaches. But if you go to tatianateaches.com, that would be a great place for all things related to me. But I do love to use LinkedIn and connect with people on LinkedIn. So that would be great for us to connect. And my big goal, Mark, is to create an online community of university lecturers, adjunct professors, to be able to exchange ideas, to collaborate with each other, to have that networking that we can create in the classroom, but for us as educators, because I don't see that it exists for lecturers anywhere. I don't see that. I've never seen it anywhere, and I've been actively searching for it for a very long time. So I've decided that I'm going to need to be the person to make that community happen. So that is my goal, something that I'm working towards on my platform, is creating that space for educators.
Brilliant. I can't think of anything better or a better person to pull that together. So the best of luck with that. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Dick. I really appreciate. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you to everyone who's been so excited and chatting away in the chat and being so enthusiastic about what we're doing. As I said, we could chat forever, but I really do appreciate your time. Do go and check that out. We have links and things in the description of this video as well. So if you haven't managed to dot any of those things down, do check that out as well. And Tatiana, thank you so much indeed, and looking forward to connecting
Thank
again
you,
very,
Mark.
very soon.
Pleasure.
See you soon. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.